Emma Hayes hurried through the busy streets of Manhattan, clutching her worn leather purse close to her body. She was running late for her annual checkup at the Women's Wellness Center, and being late for anything made her nervous. At 26, Emma lived her life by the rules. Always on time, always prepared, always responsible. It was how she'd managed to put herself through nursing school while working 2 jobs. "I'm so sorry I'm late," Emma said, rushing up to the receptionist's desk. There was a delay on the subway. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, smiled warmly. "Don't worry, honey. Dr. Patterson is running behind schedule anyway. Just fill out these forms." Emma sat in the waiting room, surrounded by expensive artwork and elegant furniture that made her feel out of place. The Women's Wellness Center was far from her usual clinic, but her insurance had changed, and this was the only place available that fit her schedule between classes and work. "Miss Hayes," a nurse called her name, leading her to an examination room. "The doctor will be right with you." Emma changed into the paper gown, trying not to shiver in the cold room. She thought about her upcoming final exams in pediatric nursing. Just 1 more year, and she'd finally achieve her dream of becoming a pediatric nurse. Working with children had always been her calling. Dr. Patterson entered the room, but she wasn't alone. A younger doctor followed her, looking distracted and carrying several files. "Emma, this is Dr. Roberts. She's doing her residency with us. Do you mind if she assists today?" "No, that's fine," Emma replied, always eager to help fellow medical professionals learn. She'd soon be on the other side of that equation. The examination proceeded normally until Dr. Roberts prepared for the routine procedure. In her distraction, she reached for the wrong tray, the one marked IVF D24 instead of the standard examination tools. Meanwhile, in a sleek office building across town, Gabriel Devereaux stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city he practically owned. At 35, he'd built Devereaux Industries into a global empire, but today his mind was on more personal matters. "The deposit has been made at the clinic," his assistant informed him. "They'll preserve the sample until you're ready to proceed with surrogacy." Gabriel nodded curtly. He had no interest in marriage or relationships, but he needed an heir to his empire. Surrogacy seemed the most efficient solution. No messy emotions, no complicated relationships, just a straightforward business transaction. Back at the clinic, Emma felt a slight discomfort during the procedure, but assumed it was normal. Dr. Roberts realized her mistake too late, her face turning pale as she checked the labels. But instead of speaking up, fear of losing her residency made her stay quiet. "All done," Dr. Patterson announced. "Everything looks normal, Emma. We'll see you next year." Emma left the clinic that day without knowing that her life had just changed. Forever. She returned to her tiny apartment, changed into her waitressing uniform, and headed to her evening shift at Joe's Diner. "You look tired, sweetie," said Martha, the owner's wife, as Emma tied on her apron. "You're working too hard." "I'm fine," Emma insisted, although she had been feeling more tired lately. "Just busy with finals coming up." The weeks that followed brought subtle changes. Emma found herself exhausted all the time, fighting waves of nausea in the morning. She blamed it on stress and her hectic schedule until the day she fainted during her hospital internship. "Miss Hayes," the emergency room doctor said, looking at her test results with a puzzled expression. "According to this, you're pregnant." Emma laughed, thinking it was a joke. "That's impossible. I haven't." The doctor looked at her with growing concern. "You've never been intimate with anyone?" "No, never," Emma whispered, her world spinning. There must be some mistake. But there was no mistake in the test results. As Emma sat in the emergency room, trying to make sense of the impossible, she had no idea that across town, Gabriel Devereaux was reviewing the quarterly reports from his fertility clinic investments, including the Women's Wellness Center. The wheels of fate had been set in motion, and soon both their lives would collide in ways neither could have imagined. Emma's simple, ordered life was about to become the center of a storm involving one of the most powerful men in New York, all because of one distracted doctor's devastating mistake. Martha found Emma crying in the diner's break room that evening. "What's wrong, honey?" "I don't know what to do," Emma sobbed. "Something impossible has happened and I don't understand how." "Start from the beginning," Martha said. sitting down and taking Emma's trembling hands in hers. As Emma explained the situation, she couldn't know that at that very moment Dr. Roberts was finally gathering the courage to confess her mistake to the clinic's board of directors. The revelation would soon reach Gabriel Devereaux, and his reaction would set off a chain of events that would change not only Emma's life but his own carefully controlled world as well. In his penthouse office, Gabriel was finishing a late meeting when his phone rang. The caller ID showed the clinic's number. He answered, expecting a routine update about his stored sample. Instead, the news he received made him grip his desk so hard his knuckles turned white. "Mr. Devereaux," the clinic's director said, her voice shaking, "there's been an incident with your specimen. A most unfortunate accident." The sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows through the windows of both Gabriel's luxury office and Emma's modest apartment. Neither of them knew it yet, but their lives were now irreversibly intertwined. Emma curled up on her second-hand couch, hugging her knees to her chest, while Gabriel stood at his window, his usual cool demeanor cracking as he processed the news that somewhere in his city, an unknown woman was carrying his child. The stage was set for a story that would shake the foundations of both their worlds, a story of impossible circumstances, undeniable connections, and the power of unexpected love to break through the strongest walls around a heart. Emma sat in the clinic's conference room, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. The room was too big, too cold, and filled with too many serious-looking people in expensive suits. Dr. Patterson sat next to her, looking worried. The clinic's director, Dr. Hamilton, kept checking her phone. "Mr. Devereaux will be here any minute," Dr. Hamilton said, smoothing her skirt for the 100th time. Emma had spent the last week in a daze after learning the truth. The clinic had called her in for an urgent meeting to discuss what they called a procedural incident. She still couldn't believe what they'd told her, that during her routine checkup, she had been accidentally inseminated with someone's sperm sample. Not just anyone's sample, but that of Gabriel Devereaux, one of the richest men in New York. The door burst open, and Emma's heart nearly stopped. Gabriel Devereaux strode in, followed by two men carrying briefcases. He was tall, with dark hair and cold blue eyes that swept the room before landing on Emma. She had seen his picture in magazines, but in person, he was even more intimidating. "This is the woman?" he asked, his voice sharp as ice. Dr. Hamilton nodded. "Yes, Mr. Devereaux, this is Emma Hayes." Gabriel sat down across from Emma, studying her like she was a problem to be solved. "Miss Hayes, I understand you're a nursing student." "Yes," Emma managed to say. "Final year, pediatric nursing. And you have no idea how this happened." Emma shook her head. "I came in for a regular checkup, that's all. I never wanted... I didn't know..." "So of course you didn't," one of Gabriel's lawyers cut in smoothly. "That's why we've prepared a generous compensation package." He slid a thick document across the table. Emma stared at it, her hands still trembling. "We're prepared to cover all. Medical expenses," the lawyer continued, "plus a substantial settlement in exchange for full custody of the child after birth." Emma's head snapped up. "What?" "Mr. Devereaux is willing to be very generous," the second lawyer added. "The amount we're offering would cover your student loans and set you up quite comfortably. You want me to give up the baby?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Gabriel leaned forward. "Miss Hayes, let's be practical. You're young, still in school, working as a waitress. This child is my heir. They deserve the best of everything, the finest schools, the best opportunities. Surely you can see that's in everyone's best interest." Emma felt something shift inside her. The trembling in her hands stopped. She looked directly into Gabriel's cold blue eyes. "No," she said. The room went silent. Gabriel's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "No," he repeated, as if he'd never heard the word before. "I didn't ask for this," Emma said, her voice growing stronger. "I didn't plan it. But this baby is growing inside me, and I won't sign away their future before they're even born." "Miss Hayes," Dr. Hamilton intervened, "perhaps you should take some time to think about this offer." "I don't need time," Emma stood up, grabbing her worn purse. "I won't be bullied into giving up my baby. Not for any amount of money." She walked toward the door, then turned back to face Gabriel. "This baby might be your heir, Mr. Devereaux, but they're my child too. And I won't let them be treated like..." A business transaction. With that, she left the room, her heart pounding but her head held high. She made it to the elevator before the tears started falling. Back in the conference room, Gabriel sat in stunned silence. People didn't say no to him, ever. He turned to his lawyers. Find everything you can about her, everything. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She paced her small apartment, one hand resting on her still flat stomach. What are we going to do? She whispered to her unborn child. He's so powerful and we have nothing. Her phone rang, making her jump. It was Martha from the diner. Emma, honey, there are reporters outside the diner asking questions about you. What's going on? Emma's heart sank. She went to her window and saw a van with a news logo parked across the street. Somehow the story had leaked. Meanwhile, Gabriel sat in his home office looking at Emma's file. 26 years old, working 2 jobs while studying, perfect grades. No family except an aunt in Ohio. Something about her defiance bothered him. He was used to people who wanted his money, who could be bought. Emma Hayes was different. His phone buzzed with a news alert. The story was breaking. Billionaire's heir and fertility clinic mix-up. He cursed, knowing this would affect stock prices tomorrow. But what really caught his attention was a quote from Emma in the article. I just want what's best for my baby. Money isn't everything. Gabriel walked to his window, looking out over the city lights. For the first time in years, someone had surprised him. He didn't like surprises. But he couldn't deny that Emma Hayes had shown more backbone than most men he dealt with in business. His phone rang, his PR team wanting to discuss damage control, but Gabriel's mind was elsewhere. He found himself thinking about Emma's eyes when she'd stood up to him, full of fire and determination. Send a security team to her apartment, he ordered his head of security. The press will be all over this by morning, and find out if she has proper prenatal care. He told himself it was just about protecting his heir, but something else nagged at him. The image of Emma walking out of that room, refusing to be bought. For the first time in his life, Gabriel Devereaux had met someone he couldn't control, couldn't intimidate, and couldn't buy. And strangely, instead of making him angry, it made him curious. Emma fell asleep on her couch, exhausted from crying. She dreamed of a child with Gabriel's blue eyes and her own stubborn chin. Outside her building, reporters gathered, waiting for the story of the year, the billionaire, the nurse, and the baby that would change everything. Neither Emma nor Gabriel knew it yet, but their confrontation in that conference room was just the beginning. Their lives were about to become more intertwined than either of them could imagine, all because of one woman's courage to say no to the most powerful man she'd ever met. Emma woke up to the sound of camera shutters clicking outside her window. The morning sun barely filtered through her cheap curtains, but the reporters had already gathered on the street below. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing with calls from unknown numbers. "This is Kelly Martinez from Channel 7 News," one voicemail said. "We'd love to hear your side of the story." Martha called, just as Emma was trying to figure out how to get to her morning classes. "Don't come to work today." "Honey," Martha said, worry clear in her voice. "There are cameras everywhere. Joe had to call the police to clear the parking lot." Emma sat on her bed, feeling trapped. "I'm so sorry, Martha. I never meant to cause trouble for you and Joe." "Don't. You dare apologize. We're worried about you. Do you have enough food? Should we bring you anything?" Before Emma could answer, someone knocked on her door. Her heart jumped into her throat until she heard a familiar voice. "Miss Hayes, this is Frank Thompson, head of security for Mr. Devereaux. We're here to help." Emma opened the door to find a tall man in a dark suit, accompanied by 2 others. They looked out of place in her shabby apartment building. "Mr. Devereaux has arranged for your safety and comfort," Frank explained. "We can take you to a secure location." Emma crossed her arms. "You mean he wants to hide me away?" "Miss Hayes, there are 30 reporters downstairs. More are coming. Your address is all over the internet. This isn't safe for you or the baby." The word baby made Emma's hand move instinctively to her stomach. She was responsible for more than just herself now. "I have classes," she said weakly. "We've already spoken with your school. They're arranging for you to attend remotely until..." Things calmed down. While Emma considered her options, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Take the security, Miss Hayes. We need to talk. GD. Across town, Gabriel sat in his office, watching multiple news channels covering the story. His PR team huddled around his conference table, planning damage control. The stock is down 3 points, his CFO reported nervously. The clinic is facing multiple investigations, added his legal counsel. They're claiming doctor-patient confidentiality, but someone leaked the story. Gabriel barely heard them. His eyes were fixed on a grainy photo of Emma on one of the news channels taken through her window. She looked scared, vulnerable. Something twisted in his chest. "Sir?" His assistant interrupted his thoughts. "Your mother is on line 1. She's seen the news." Gabriel pinched the bridge of his nose. Eleanor Devereux was the last person he wanted to deal with right now. Gabriel James Devereux. His mother's voice cut through the phone line. "When were you planning to tell me I'm going to be a grandmother? Mother, this is a complicated situation. I saw that poor girl on the news. She looks terrified. What are you doing about it? I've sent security." "Security?" Eleanor scoffed. "She's carrying my grandchild. She needs more than security. She needs family." Back at Emma's apartment, she was throwing some clothes into a bag while Frank's team secured the hallway. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Mr. Devereux has a secure apartment building in Manhattan. You'll be comfortable there." Emma wanted to refuse, to stand her ground, but she could hear the reporters calling her name from the street below. Her tiny apartment suddenly felt like a cage. As they led her to a waiting car with tinted windows, Emma's phone buzzed again. This time it was Dr. Patterson. "Emma, I'm so sorry about all this. The board is launching an investigation. Dr. Roberts has admitted her mistake. Will she lose her license?" "Most likely." "Emma, there's something else. The press is digging into your background. They found out about your parents." Emma's heart stopped. She hadn't thought about that part of her life being exposed. In the car, Frank noticed her distress. "Are you all right, Miss Hayes? Should we stop?" "No," Emma whispered. "Just keep driving." Meanwhile, Gabriel was dealing with his own family. Drama. His brother James had barged into his office. "A baby Gabe, really? What happened to the surrogate plan?" "This wasn't planned, James." "Obviously not. But it's perfect, isn't it? A ready-made heir, and the mother is a nobody. We can control this." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "She's not a nobody, and she's not as controllable as you think." James laughed. "Everyone has a price, brother. You taught me that." But Gabriel wasn't so sure anymore. The way Emma had looked at him in that conference room, choosing her unborn child over his millions, it had shaken something loose in him. His phone buzzed with a message from Frank. "Miss Hayes is secure, but sir, there might be a problem. We found something in her background check." Gabriel opened the attached file and began reading. His expression darkened with each line. Emma arrived at the apartment building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel. The doorman whisked her through a private entrance away from the gathered press. The apartment was bigger than her entire building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of Central Park. "Mr. Devereux will be here this evening to discuss arrangements," Frank informed her. "Fair, sir. The kitchen is fully stocked, and there's a secure phone line if you need anything." Left alone, Emma wandered through the luxurious rooms, feeling like an intruder. Her hand rested on her stomach again. "I guess this is the world you come from," she whispered to her unborn child. "But I won't let it change who you become." Her phone buzzed one last time. This time it was a message from her aunt in Ohio. "Emma, honey, I just saw the news. Call me. You're not alone." Tears filled Emma's eyes as she looked out over the city. Somewhere out there, Gabriel Devereux was reading about her past, learning secrets she'd tried to forget. Soon he would arrive, and they would have to face each other again. But this time, Emma wasn't in a cold conference room. She was in his world, surrounded by his wealth and power. And somehow, that made her feel even more determined to stand her ground. As the sun set over Manhattan, two people prepared for a conversation that would change everything. A pregnant nursing student with nothing but her principles, and a billionaire who was beginning to question everything he thought he knew about control, power, and the true meaning of family. The sunset painted the luxury apartment in shades of orange and gold, when Gabriel Devereaux arrived. Emma had spent hours pacing, trying to prepare herself for this moment. She'd changed her clothes 3 times, finally settling on her nicest sweater and jeans, still painfully ordinary compared to the elegant surroundings. "Miss Hayes," Gabriel said as he entered, his tie loosened slightly. He looked tired. "I trust the accommodations are satisfactory." "They're very nice," Emma replied stiffly. "But you didn't bring me here to discuss the apartment." Gabriel walked to the window, looking out at the city he usually commanded with such confidence. Now he seemed unsure, almost hesitant. "I read your file," he finally said, "about your parents." Emma's heart clenched. "That's none of your business. It became my business when you became pregnant with my child." He turned to face her. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you what?" "That my father killed my mother and then himself when I was 12. That I spent 6 years in foster care." Emma's voice cracked. "Is that supposed to change something?" Gabriel's expression softened slightly. "It explains a lot about you. Your determination, your independence. I don't want your pity. It's not pity, Miss Hayes, it's..." He paused, searching for words. "Admiration." Emma hadn't expected that. She sat down on the expensive leather couch, suddenly feeling drained. "The press will find out," Gabriel continued. "They're already digging. I wanted to warn you." "I've lived with this my whole life," Emma said quietly. "I won't let it define me or my baby." Gabriel sat across from her, his usual commanding presence somehow gentler. "That's why you refused the money, isn't it? You don't want anyone controlling your child's life." "I grew up with nothing, Mr. Devereaux. But my Aunt Sarah, she taught me that love matters more than money. She couldn't afford to adopt me, but she visited every month, sent cards, called when she could. That meant everything." Just then there was a knock at the door. Frank entered with an elegant older woman. "Mother?" Gabriel stood, surprised. "What are you doing here?" Eleanor Devereaux swept into the room like a queen, but her eyes were kind when they landed on Emma. "Did you think I wouldn't come meet the mother of my grandchild?" Emma tried to stand, but Eleanor waved her back down. "Stay comfortable, dear." "Gabriel, your security team tells me this poor girl hasn't eaten properly all day. I brought dinner." More staff entered, carrying covered dishes that filled the air with delicious aromas. Emma's stomach growled, reminding her that she had been too nervous to eat. "Mrs. Devereaux, you didn't have to." "Eleanor, please, and of course I had to. You're family now, whether my son accepts it or not." Gabriel watched in amazement as his mother took control of the situation, setting up dinner and chatting with Emma as if they'd known each other for years. He'd never seen anyone break down walls so effortlessly. Over dinner, Emma found herself relaxing despite herself. Eleanor asked about her nursing studies, her dreams of working with children. "So brave, studying and working 2 jobs, Eleanor said. Approvingly. "Gabriel, did you know Emma has a perfect GPA? Mother, I've read her file. Reading a file isn't the same as knowing a person." Eleanor turned back to Emma. "Tell me, dear, do you like classical music? The symphony is performing next week." "Mother, she can't go out. The press, nonsense, she can't hide forever. Better to face them head on, show them we're a united family." Emma nearly choked on her water. "Family? Of course, family. That's my grandchild you're carrying. Speaking of which, have you seen a proper doctor yet?" Before Emma could answer, Gabriel cut in. "I've arranged for the best OB-GYN in the city, without consulting Emma." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Gabriel, dear, that's not how this works." For the first time, Emma saw Gabriel Devereaux look chastised. It made him seem more human somehow. Later, after Eleanor left with promises to return, tomorrow Emma and Gabriel sat in awkward silence. "Your mother is not what I expected," Emma finally said. "She's one of a kind." Gabriel hesitated. "She's right, though. About the doctor. I should have asked you first." "I would like to meet them before deciding," Emma said carefully. "This is still my body, my choice." Gabriel nodded slowly. "Fair enough." He stood to leave, then paused. "Miss Hayes, Emma, I want you to know your past doesn't change anything about our situation, but it does help me understand you better." Emma walked him to the door. "Mr. Devereaux." "Gabriel. Under the circumstances, you should call me Gabriel." Gabriel, thank you for the security, and for not exposing my past to the press. He turned to look at her, really look at her, maybe for the first time. In the soft evening light, her simple beauty struck him, not the manufactured perfection he was used to, but something real and touching. Your past is your story to tell, Emma, when and if you choose to tell it. After he left, Emma sat by the window, watching the city lights twinkle. Her phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Lunch tomorrow, dear? I know a lovely private restaurant. Despite everything, Emma smiled. Perhaps she wasn't as alone in this as she'd thought. In his car, Gabriel found himself thinking about Emma's story. He'd grown up with every privilege, while she'd overcome unimaginable tragedy. Yet she was the stronger one, refusing to be bought or controlled. His phone rang. James again, probably with more schemes about controlling the situation. Gabriel declined the call. For the first time in his life, he didn't want to control something. He wanted to understand it, understand her. As his car wound through the city streets, two people in very different rooms thought about each other, about the walls beginning to crack between them, and about the child that was forcing them to see each other as more than just adversaries in a legal battle. The night settled over Manhattan, bringing with it the possibility that sometimes the worst accidents can lead to the best changes in life. And somewhere in the city, Eleanor Devereaux smiled. Knowing that her son had finally met his match in more ways than one, the headlines screamed across every newspaper and gossip site, "Tragic past of Devereaux, baby mama revealed." Emma's hands shook as she read the articles. They'd found everything. The police reports, the foster care records, even old photos of her parents' house with crime scene tape. "Don't read that trash," Eleanor said, taking Emma's tablet away. They were having lunch in the private room of an exclusive restaurant, safely away from prying eyes. The vultures will find something else to write about soon enough, but Emma couldn't forget the words she'd read. "They're saying I'm unstable because of my past, that I'm not fit to be a mother." "Nonsense," Eleanor patted her hand. "You're exactly what this family needs. Someone real, someone with strength." Just then, Gabriel burst into the room looking furious. "I'll sue every one of them. Their papers won't be worth the ink they're printed with when I'm done." "Sit down, dear," Eleanor commanded. "You're upsetting Emma." Gabriel stopped, noticing Emma's pale face and red eyes. His anger shifted to concern. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Emma said automatically, the way she'd learned to say in foster care. "It's just, they found my old school pictures from right after it happened." "I look so lost." Gabriel sat down next to her, closer than he'd ever been before. "You were a child who'd been through hell. Anyone would look lost. But now everyone's talking about it. My classmates, my professors, even my patients' parents at the hospital. Where I intern, they're all whispering." Eleanor stood up. "I think you two need to talk. I'll go see about dessert." Alone with Emma, Gabriel struggled to find the right words. Business deals he could handle, but this was different. "I've had my team working to shut down the worst of the coverage," he said. "But Emma, maybe we should consider making a statement. Tell your story on your terms." Emma looked at him, surprised by the gentleness in his voice when he said her name. "I wouldn't know how. We have the best PR team in New York. They can help guide you, but the words would be yours. Your truth." Before Emma could respond, her phone buzzed. It was Martha from the diner. "Emma, honey, you need to see this. Someone sold pictures of you working here. They're saying awful things." More tears filled Emma's eyes. Gabriel took her phone gently and spoke to Martha himself. "This is Gabriel. Devereaux. I'll have my lawyers handle this immediately. No one attacks Emma's work ethic on my watch." After hanging up, he noticed Emma staring at him. "What? You called me Emma, and you defended me." "Of course I defended you. Working hard is admirable. Unlike those trust fund brats who've never earned a dollar in their lives." Emma managed a small smile. "Like you? I built my company from the ground up. My father cut me off when I refused to join his law firm." Gabriel looked surprised at himself for sharing that. He never talked about his past. "Really? But you're so corporate." "I learned to survive in this world. But I never forgot what it felt like to have something to prove." Their eyes met, and for a moment something shifted between them. Understanding maybe, or something more. Eleanor returned with a chocolate cake that made Emma's mouth water. "The baby wants chocolate," she announced, making Emma laugh despite everything. Later that afternoon, Emma had her first appointment with the new OB/GYN Dr. Chen. Gabriel insisted on accompanying her, for security reasons. "Everything looks perfect," Dr. Chen said, showing them the ultrasound. "Would you like to know the gender?" Emma looked at Gabriel. He nodded, his eyes fixed on the screen. "It's a girl," Dr. Chen announced. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. Again, but this time from joy. When she looked at Gabriel, she was stunned to see his eyes were wet too. "A daughter," he whispered. In that moment, something profound changed. It wasn't just an heir anymore. It was their little girl. Outside the doctor's office, reporters waited behind police barriers. Gabriel helped Emma into his car, shielding her from the cameras. "Move in with me," he said suddenly. "What?" "To my house. It's more secure than the apartment. More space. Better for our daughter." Emma felt her heart skip at those words. "Gabriel, I can't just, please," he said softly. "Let me protect you both." Before she could answer, his phone rang. It was James. "Brother, have you seen the latest? That clinic doctor, Roberts. She's giving interviews, saying the insemination wasn't an accident." Gabriel's face darkened. "What?" "She's claiming Emma knew, that she planned it all." Emma watched Gabriel's expression change and felt her heart sink. Would he believe these lies? But Gabriel surprised her. He ended the call and turned to her. "I know it's not true. I've seen how this has turned your life upside down. No one would choose this." "Thank you for believing me," Emma whispered. He reached out and for the first time touched her hand. "I'm learning to trust my instincts, and they say you're the most honest person I've ever met." The car drove through the city streets as the sun began to set. Emma looked down at their still joined hands, thinking about his offer. The apartment was lovely, but lonely, and something was changing between them, something neither of them had expected. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, what? I'll move in, for our daughter's sake." Gabriel smiled, a real smile, not his usual controlled expression. It transformed his whole face, making him look younger, more approachable. "I'll have Frank arrange everything." As they drove toward her temporary apartment to pack, Emma felt both terrified and strangely hopeful. She was about to move in with a man she'd hated just weeks ago, carrying a child neither of them had planned. But when she looked at Gabriel, she didn't see the cold billionaire anymore. She saw someone who was changing, learning, trying to be better, just like her. The city lights began to twinkle as night fell, and somewhere in the growing darkness, two hearts began to beat in sync, brought together by fate, scandal, and a tiny life that was already changing everything. Gabriel's mansion, on the outskirts of the city, felt like another world. Emma stood in her new bedroom, bigger than her entire old apartment, trying to make her few belongings look at home among the expensive furniture. "The closet is fully stocked," the housekeeper, Mrs. Reynolds, said kindly. "Mrs. Eleanor had everything ordered in your size." Emma touched the designer clothes with their tags still attached. "This is too much." "Nonsense," Eleanor swept in, elegant as always. "You're a Devereaux now, at least in the public eye. You need to look the part." But Emma didn't feel like a Devereaux. Even after 2 weeks in the mansion, she felt like an intruder. Gabriel was rarely home, always dealing with the ongoing scandal. At his company, the clinic's investigation had revealed more problems, and the stock prices were suffering. One morning, Emma came down to breakfast to find James Devereaux sitting at the table, reading financial reports. "Well, if it isn't our little gold digger," he said without looking up. Emma's hands clenched. "I never wanted your family's money." "No? Then why did Dr. Roberts say you asked questions about the fertility procedures during your checkup?" "Seemed awfully interested for someone who claims it was all an accident." "That's a lie, is it?" "The press seems to think otherwise. Our stock has dropped 15 points since this scandal broke." Gabriel walked in just then, his face thunderous. "Get out, James." "Brother, be reasonable. This girl is destroying everything." "We built. I said get out." Gabriel's voice made even Emma jump. "If you ever speak to her like that again, you'll be looking for a new job." James stormed out, leaving a tense silence behind. "I'm sorry about him," Gabriel said, loosening his tie. "He's always been protective of the company." He's right about the stock prices though, isn't he? Emma asked quietly. Gabriel's silence. Was answer enough. Emma felt the weight of guilt crushing her chest. Maybe I should leave, find somewhere else. No. Gabriel's response was immediate and fierce. This is your home now, our daughter's home. The baby chose that moment to kick, making Emma gasp. Without thinking, she grabbed Gabriel's hand and placed it on her growing belly. His eyes widened as he felt the movement. For a moment they stood frozen, connected by their daughter's kicks and something deeper neither dared name. The moment broke when Gabriel's phone rang. Another crisis at the office. I have to go, he said reluctantly, his hand lingering on her stomach. Will you be okay? Emma nodded, but inside she felt more alone than ever. Later that day, she was reading in the garden when Mrs. Reynolds brought her the afternoon papers. The headlines made her blood run cold. Clinic doctor reveals all Emma Hayes' secret, plot to trap a billionaire. The article quoted Dr. Roberts extensively, claiming Emma had asked detailed questions about fertility procedures and seemed unusually interested in where samples were stored. It was clearly premeditated, Dr. Roberts was quoted saying. She saw an opportunity and took it. Emma's hands shook so badly she could barely read the rest. The article mentioned her past again, suggesting her traumatic childhood had made her unstable and calculating. She ran to the bathroom, violently sick. Mrs. Reynolds found her there, crying. Come now, dear. This isn't good for the baby. Everything they're saying. People will believe it. Gabriel might believe it. Mr. Devereaux knows the truth. But did he? Emma had noticed him working later and later, barely seeing her except at breakfast. When they did talk, something had changed. The warmth that had been growing between them felt frozen by suspicion. That evening, she heard Gabriel come home late. She went to his study, knowing she had to face this. He sat at his desk, looking exhausted. Papers were spread everywhere, financial reports, PR statements, legal documents. Gabriel? He looked up, his eyes unreadable. You should be resting. I saw the article about Dr. Roberts. Emma, I don't have time. Please, I need to know if you believe her. Gabriel stood up, running a hand through his hair. What I believe doesn't matter. The damage is done. It matters to me. Emma's voice cracked. Everything I've worked for, my reputation, my career, it's all being destroyed, but losing your trust, that would be worse. Why? His question was barely a whisper. Because. Emma struggled to find the words. Because somewhere between hating you and living here, between fighting you and carrying your child, I started to. She couldn't finish. Gabriel moved closer, his eyes intense. Started to what? Before she could answer, his office door burst open. It was Frank, looking grave. Sir, we have a problem. Someone broke into Miss Hayes' old apartment. They found something. Gabriel's expression hardened. What did they find? Medical books, pages marked about fertility procedures, notes about the clinic's security system. Emma felt the world spin. Those aren't mine. I've never... But Gabriel had stepped back, his walls slamming up. I have a board meeting tomorrow morning. We'll discuss this later. Emma watched him leave, feeling her world crumble. Someone was framing her, but who? And more importantly, why? In her room that night, she packed a small bag. She couldn't stay where she wasn't trusted. Her Aunt Sarah would take her in, but as she reached for her coat, she felt her daughter kick again. This child deserved better than a life on the run. Emma had spent enough time in her life running from painful truths. No, she would stay. She would fight. She would prove her innocence not just for herself, but for her daughter. And maybe if she was brave enough, for the man she was finally ready to admit she was falling in love with, even if he no longer believed in her. Outside her window, a car pulled up to the mansion. Through the curtains, Emma saw James getting out, carrying a file. He looked up at her window and smiled, a cold, calculating smile that sent chills down her spine. Suddenly, Emma had a terrible feeling she knew exactly who was behind the accusations, but proving it would mean taking on not just the press, but the entire Devereaux family. As she lay in bed that night, one hand on her growing belly, Emma made a decision. She had survived her parents' tragedy. She had survived foster care. She would survive this too. "We're stronger than they know," she whispered to her unborn daughter. "And your father. He just needs to remember how to trust his heart instead of the lies they're feeding him." In his study, Gabriel stared at the medical books Frank's team had found, wanting desperately to believe in Emma's innocence, but trained by years of business to trust evidence over emotion. His hand still tingled where he'd felt his daughter kick. Tomorrow would bring more scandal, more accusations, more damage to everything he'd built. But tonight, alone in the dark, he allowed himself to remember the look in Emma's eyes when she'd started to confess something he wasn't ready to hear, or to admit he felt too. Eleanor found Emma in the mansion's library early the next morning, surrounded by newspapers and her old notebooks from nursing school. "You haven't slept," Eleanor said, noting the dark circles under Emma's eyes. "I can't sleep. Not until I figure this out." Emma held up her actual nursing school notes. "Look at my handwriting. Now look at those supposed notes they found in my apartment." Eleanor examined both sets of papers carefully. "They're different." "Exactly. Someone forged those documents, and I think I know who." Just then they heard voices from Gabriel's study across the hall. James was there again, speaking loudly enough for his words to carry. "The board is meeting in an hour. Gabriel, we need to present a united front. The company is bleeding money because of this scandal." "What do you suggest?" Gabriel's voice sounded tired. "Cut her loose. Publicly deny any relationship beyond the accidental insemination. Say we're investigating her claims. Distance yourself completely." Emma's heart stopped. Eleanor squeezed her hand. "He won't do it," Eleanor whispered. "He cares about you." But Gabriel's response was only silence. Emma stood up, her legs shaking. "I need some air." She walked to the garden, her safe haven in the huge mansion. The morning sun was bright, making her squint. She didn't notice she was being followed until she heard footsteps on the gravel path. "It's over, you know." James's voice made her skin crawl. "The board will force him to cut ties with you." Emma turned to face him. "Why do you hate me so much?" "Hate? You?" James laughed. "I don't hate you. You're nothing. Just a gold digger who got lucky. But this company is everything. I've spent my whole life in Gabriel's shadow, watching him build it, waiting for him to make one mistake. And I'm that mistake? You're perfect. The scandal, the tragic past, the convenient pregnancy. When this is over, Gabriel will be forced to step down. And guess who's next in line?" Emma felt cold despite the warm sun. "You planned this, all of it." "Planned? No, but when that idiot doctor made her mistake, I saw an opportunity. It was easy to plant evidence in your apartment, even easier to pay Dr. Roberts to lie." "I'll tell Gabriel everything." James stepped closer, his smile cruel. "He won't believe you. I made sure of that. Those medical books? I got them from the same school you attended. The notes, written by someone with similar handwriting. Everything points to you being a calculating gold digger. Why are you telling me this? Because you can't prove any of it. And soon you'll be gone." Just another scandal Gabriel had to overcome. He might even thank me for opening his eyes. Emma's hand went protectively to her stomach. James noticed. "Don't worry, you'll be well compensated. Better than what Gabriel offered. All you have to do is disappear." "Never." James shrugged. "Then watch everything fall apart. Your choice." He walked away, leaving Emma trembling. But as her fear faded, determination took its place. James had made a crucial mistake. He'd gotten cocky. He'd confessed everything, thinking she was powerless. What he didn't know was that Emma had learned something in foster care. Always be prepared. The tiny recording device in her pocket, a gift from Martha who worried about her safety, had caught every word. But before she could act on this evidence, she heard commotion from the house. Running inside, she found Gabriel in the foyer, his face ashen. "The board meeting?" she asked. "Postponed." His voice was strange. Dr. Roberts was just found dead in her apartment. Apparent suicide. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. "What?" "She left a note, confessing that she lied about you, that someone paid her to do it." "Did she say who?" "No." Gabriel looked lost. "Emma, I don't." She stepped back. "You were ready to abandon us this morning. I heard you with James." "I wasn't Mr. Devereaux," Frank interrupted from the doorway. "There's something you need to see." He handed Gabriel a tablet. Security camera footage played, showing James entering Dr. Roberts' apartment building late last night. Gabriel's face hardened as he watched. Years of trust and brotherhood crumbled in seconds. "There's more," Emma said quietly. She took out her phone, playing the recording from the garden. As James's confession played, Gabriel's expression went from shock to fury to deep shame. He looked at Emma, really looked at her, seeing the pain and exhaustion in her face. "I almost let him destroy you," he whispered. "I doubted you." "You did." Emma's voice was steady. "That's something we'll have to deal with. But right now, you need to stop your brother before someone else gets hurt." Gabriel reached for her, but Emma stepped back again. "Go, do what you need to do, but Gabriel, when you're done, we need to talk about everything." He understood. Trust, once broken, had to be rebuilt, if it could be rebuilt at all. As Gabriel left to confront his brother, Eleanor appeared at Emma's side. "Well done, my dear. I didn't do anything. James got careless." "No." Eleanor smiled knowingly. "You stayed strong. You fought back. That's why I knew you were perfect for this family. And for my son." Emma touched her belly, feeling her daughter. "Move. I did it for her and for love," Eleanor finished softly. "Even if neither of you is ready to admit it yet." Outside, storm clouds gathered over the mansion. In his office, Gabriel confronted the brother who had nearly destroyed everything. In her garden, Emma finally let herself cry, for Dr. Roberts, for Gabriel's broken trust, for her own shattered innocence. But as the first raindrops fell, she felt her daughter kick again, strong and determined. Like mother, like daughter, they were survivors. Now she just had to decide if she could survive opening her heart to Gabriel again, knowing he had once been ready to throw her away. The storm broke over Manhattan, washing away old lies and bringing new truths to light. But some storms, Emma knew, leave permanent changes in their wake. The question was, would those changes break them apart or forge something stronger between them? In his confrontation with James, Gabriel would have to face his own demons, his tendency to trust evidence over emotion, his fear of vulnerability, his lifetime of keeping people at arm's length. And in her garden, Emma faced her own truth, that sometimes the greatest risk isn't in trusting others, but in trusting yourself to love again after betrayal. The rain fell harder, but somewhere beyond the clouds, the sun waited to shine again. Just as somewhere beneath their pain and doubt, love waited for its chance to grow anew. The media circus around the Devereaux mansion reached fever pitch as news of James's arrest broke. Police cars lined the driveway, their lights flashing against the darkening sky. Inside, Emma watched from the library window as Gabriel spoke with detectives. "He's confessed to everything," Frank reported, standing respectfully by the door. "The evidence tampering, bribing Dr. Roberts, even breaking into your old apartment." "And Dr. Roberts's death?" Emma asked quietly. "He claims she panicked, threatened to expose him. He went to her apartment to pay her more money, but she was already—" Frank trailed off, seeing Emma's pale face. Eleanor brought Emma a cup of tea. "You should be resting, dear. Think of the baby." But Emma couldn't rest, not when she kept seeing Dr. Roberts' face, remembering her as the distracted young doctor who'd changed her life with one careless mistake. Now she was dead, another victim of James's ruthless ambition. Gabriel entered the library looking exhausted. His tie was loose, his usually perfect hair mussed from running his hands through it. "The police are done for now," he said. "They have enough evidence for multiple charges. Securities fraud, evidence tampering, conspiracy. What about the company?" Emma asked. Gabriel's surprise at her question showed on his face. "You're worried about the company? After everything? It's your life's work. And—" she touched her belly. "It's our daughter's inheritance." The simple word "our" seemed to hit Gabriel hard. He sank into a chair, the weight of the day finally showing. The stock is actually up. The truth about James's manipulation, your innocence being proven. The market is responding positively. Eleanor stood. ever sensitive to moments that needed privacy. Frank, help me check on the security arrangements. Alone together for the first time since the truth came out, Emma and Gabriel sat in uncomfortable silence. I should have trusted. You, Gabriel finally said. Yes, you should have. I've spent my whole life believing in facts, evidence, what I can prove on paper. But with you... He looked at her, his eyes vulnerable. You make me feel things I can't quantify. Is that why you were ready to cut ties with us this morning? Because feelings aren't good business? I wasn't going to do it. Gabriel stood up, pacing. When James suggested it, I was angry, not at you, at myself, for letting my guard down, for caring so much that it clouded my judgment. Caring isn't a weakness, Gabriel. In my world, it is. Look what caring about James cost me. My own brother. Emma stood too, moving to the window. The police cars were leaving, taking James away to face justice. Your brother betrayed. You because of pride and jealousy, not because you cared too much. She turned to face him. But you betrayed me because you were afraid to care at all. The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. Emma, I understand fear, Gabriel. I've spent my whole life being afraid, of getting close to people, of being hurt again. But this baby... She touched her stomach. She made me brave. Brave enough to fight for her. Brave enough to stay when everything in me wanted to run. Brave enough to fall in love with her father, even knowing he might break my heart. Gabriel's breath caught. What did you say? You heard me. Emma's voice was steady despite her racing heart. I love you. Not your money, not your power, just you. The man who sent security to protect me, who defended my work ethic, who looked at me like I was precious when you felt our daughter kick. Gabriel crossed the room in 3 long strides, pulling Emma into his arms. She let him hold her, but didn't melt against him like she wanted to. I love you, he whispered into her hair. I think I have since you stood up to me in that conference room. You were so fierce, so pure. Everything in my world is about money and power, but you only cared about our child. I still do. Emma pulled back enough to look at him, which is why we can't just pretend everything is fine. You have to learn to trust me, Gabriel. Really trust me. I will. I'll spend every day proving it to you. A sharp kick from the baby made them both smile. Gabriel's hand found its way to Emma's belly, and this time she didn't pull away. She's strong, he said proudly. Like her mother. She's a Devereaux, Emma replied. Like her father. Martha called that evening, having seen the news about James. Are you okay, honey? Do you need anything? I'm okay, Emma said, and meant it. Actually, I was wondering, would you and Joe like to cater a baby shower? Martha's delighted response made Emma laugh for the first time in days. After the call, she found Gabriel in his study signing papers. What's all this? Transfer of ownership documents. I'm putting half the company in your name. Emma stared. At him. What? Why? Because I trust you. Because you're the mother of my child. Because I love you. He looked up at her. And because you're the only person I know who won't let power change who they are. Gabriel, I don't know anything about running a company. You know about caring for people, about doing what's right even when it's hard. He stood, taking her hands. The company needs that. I need that. Emma looked at the papers, then at the man she'd come to love despite everything. Okay, she said, but I have conditions. Name them. First, we set up a foundation for foster children, real help, not just charity galas. Gabriel smiled. Done. What else? Second, Emma took a deep breath. When you're ready, when you really trust me, ask me to marry you. Not for the baby, not for the company, for love. Gabriel pulled her close, his kiss full of promises. I already have the ring. I've had it for weeks. I was just afraid. No more fear, Emma whispered against his lips. Just trust, just love. Outside the study window, the sun finally broke through the clouds, painting the garden in golden light. Eleanor, watching from the doorway, smiled softly and slipped away, leaving her son and the woman who had changed him to their private moment of healing. In 9 years of foster care, Emma had learned that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. Every day you choose to love, to trust, to stay. Now in Gabriel's arms she was finally home, not because of his mansion or his money, but because they had chosen each other, fought for each other, and learned that the greatest power isn't in controlling life, but in surrendering to love. As evening fell over the mansion, two hearts beat, in perfect rhythm, while a third tiny heartbeat reminded them both that sometimes the biggest miracles come from the smallest mistakes. The autumn leaves were turning golden when Emma waddled into the newly decorated nursery. The room was a perfect blend of luxury and warmth, soft pink walls, elegant white furniture, and handmade quilts from Martha, alongside designer baby clothes from Eleanor. "What do you think?" Gabriel asked, standing in the doorway. He'd overseen every detail personally, something that still amazed his staff. The great Gabriel Devereux choosing baby blankets and stuffed animals. "It's perfect," Emma said, running her hand over the crib. "Though she won't be sleeping here for a while, the bassinet will be in our room." Our room. The word still gave Gabriel a thrill. After James's arrest and the media storm that followed, they'd grown closer than ever. Emma had moved into the master suite, though they were taking things slow, rebuilding trust day by day. "The board meeting went well," Gabriel said, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his hands resting on her 8-month belly. "They unanimously approved your appointment to the Charitable Foundation's board. They're just happy the scandal is over. The stock is at an all-time high." "No," Gabriel kissed her neck. "They're impressed by you. Your ideas about corporate responsibility, about using our resources to help foster children. You're changing how the whole company thinks." Emma turned in his arms, about to respond, when she saw Martha hurrying down the hall. "Emma, the caterers need decisions about the baby shower menu." The baby shower had become a bigger event than Emma had planned. Eleanor had insisted on inviting just a few close friends, which in Devereux terms meant half of Manhattan's elite. But Emma had stood firm on having it at Joe's Diner, now closed for renovations that Gabriel had insisted on funding. "Go," Gabriel smiled. "Save Martha from my mother's champagne taste." But as Emma waddled away, she heard him on the phone with his contractor, checking on the diner's progress. He was learning to balance both worlds, his natural luxury with her simpler tastes. Later that afternoon, Emma had her final checkup with Dr. Chen. "Everything looks perfect," the doctor said, showing them the ultrasound. "She's in position, right on schedule." Gabriel squeezed Emma's hand, his eyes fixed on the screen. Every appointment he looked at their daughter with the same awe. "Have you decided on a name?" Dr. Chen asked. Emma and Gabriel exchanged a look. They had, but hadn't told anyone yet. "Sarah Rose Devereux," Emma said softly. "After my aunt, who never gave up on me, and Gabriel's grandmother, who built the company from nothing." Dr. Chen smiled. "Beautiful. Now, Emma, remember what we discussed. With your blood pressure—" "I know," Emma sighed. "Bed rest until delivery." Gabriel's face turned serious. "I'll make sure she follows orders." Emma wanted to protest, but she'd learned to pick her battles. And the worried look in Gabriel's eyes reminded her that he'd already almost lost them once. He wasn't taking any chances now. At home, Eleanor had taken over baby shower preparations, turning the mansion into command central. "The flowers are confirmed, the photographer is booked, and Martha's menu looks divine," she reported. "Though I still think we should have had it at the plaza." "Mom," Gabriel warned. "We agreed. The diner means something to Emma." Eleanor softened. "I know, dear. And I love that about her. She never forgets where she came from." Emma found herself tearing up. These pregnancy hormones were impossible, and Eleanor hugged her. "Now about the nursery. I saw the most darling chandelier." "No chandeliers," Emma and Gabriel said together, then laughed. That night, unable to sleep, Emma found Gabriel in his study. He was looking at old photos, him and James as children playing in this very house. "I keep wondering if I missed signs," he said as Emma sat beside him. "If I was so focused on the company that I didn't see my own brother's pain." "You can't blame yourself for his choices." "I know, but being with you, preparing for Sarah, it's made me realize how much I missed by always putting business first." Emma took the photos, setting them aside. The past is past. What matters is the future we're building. Gabriel pulled her close, his hand finding its usual spot on her belly. Sarah kicked, making them both smile. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his desk drawer. "I've been waiting for the right. Fierce." "Stay with us, Emma, please." The world went dark. Emma floated in darkness, hearing voices she couldn't quite reach. Her mother's voice, telling her to be strong. Her father's, begging forgiveness. Sarah's tiny cries. And Gabriel's voice, steady and sure. "Come back to us, love. We need you." Slowly, the darkness lifted. Emma opened her eyes to find herself in a private hospital room filled with flowers. Gabriel sat beside her bed, holding Sarah while Eleanor hovered nearby. "Welcome back," Gabriel's voice was rough with emotion. "You scared us." "How long?" 2 days. He stood carefully, bringing Sarah closer. "Someone wants to meet her mama." Emma's arms trembled as she held her daughter for the first time. Sarah was tiny but perfect, with Gabriel's blue eyes and Emma's determined chin. "She's beautiful," Eleanor wiped tears away. "I'll give you some time alone." Once Eleanor left, Gabriel sat on the bed, wrapping his arms around his family. "Don't ever scare me like that again," he said. "I can't lose you." "You won't." Emma touched his face. "We're survivors, remember?" Sarah made a tiny sound, drawing their attention. "Martha sent food from the diner," Gabriel said. "And your aunt?" "Sarah is flying in tomorrow." "The press? Don't worry about them, this is our time." Emma looked around the room, seeing flowers from her old professors, cards from her fellow nurses, balloons from Joe's diner staff. 2 worlds, perfectly blended. "I want to get married here," she said suddenly. "In the hospital?" "Next week, before. We take Sarah home, just family and close friends." Gabriel kissed her softly. "Whatever you want." The next week passed in a blur of recovery and joy. Emma grew stronger each day, surrounded by love. The hospital chapel was transformed with simple decorations, Martha's touch visible in every detail. Emma wore a simple white dress, holding Sarah in one arm and a small bouquet in the other. Gabriel waited at the altar, looking at his bride and daughter with such love it took her breath away. "Family isn't always about blood," the chaplain said during the ceremony. "Sometimes it's about choice, about love that overcomes all obstacles." Eleanor cried happy tears. Martha and Joe beamed from the front row. Emma's Aunt Sarah held her hand as Gabriel slipped a wedding band next to the vintage engagement ring. "He choose you," Emma said in her vows. "Every day I choose this love." "I choose you," Gabriel echoed. "You and Sarah, my heart, my home." Their kiss was sweet and sure, sealed with Sarah's happy gurgle. Later, at the small reception in Emma's hospital room, Gabriel made an announcement. "The Sarah Rose Foundation is expanding. We're opening a medical scholarship program for foster children who want to become nurses." Emma kissed him, knowing this was his way of honoring her journey. That night, after everyone left, the new family sat together in the quiet room. Sarah slept peacefully in her bassinet while her parents held each other. "Happy?" Gabriel asked. "Complete," Emma replied. 9 months ago, a doctor's mistake had changed their lives, but what had seemed like a scandal had become a love story. What had started as an accident had become their greatest blessing. Outside the window, the Manhattan skyline sparkled. Inside, a family born of unusual circumstances but bound by extraordinary love began their new chapter. Sarah sighed in her sleep, her tiny hand curled around her father's finger, while her mother watched with a heart full of joy. Sometimes the biggest mistakes lead to the greatest miracles. Sometimes the hardest roads lead to the best destinations. And sometimes, love grows in the most unexpected places, turning enemies into soulmates and accidents into destiny. Emma settled into Gabriel's arms, knowing that their story would be told for years to come, not for its scandal or drama, but for its truth about the power of love to heal, to transform, and to create something beautiful from life's unexpected turns. The end.